Trade Secrets, a story by Philip J. Moss, narrated by the author, produced by Nate LaMontagne. The world changed all of a sudden. People were going about their usual business, pushing each other around, seeking advantage, using persuasion, chicanery, threats, or violence, motivated by fear, greed, and sex, until the visitors arrived. For that is what the media immediately dubbed them, visitors with a capital V. It happened just the way it had been predicted in the movies, almost. Astronomers announced that they had discovered an object that was approaching Earth at high speed and would collide with it. There was no panic because everyone had been conditioned by science fiction movies to expect that the world governments would cooperate in blowing the object to smithereens. And there was cooperation. The Balkans were forgotten again. Israel revealed that it had perfected a new and more powerful type of nuclear weapon. So did Pakistan. Both countries offered to put the weapon on a delivery system manufactured by the U.S. With undisguised relief, Congress shelved debate on campaign finance reform and immediately commenced hearings to find out why the CIA had not discovered the existence of these weapons. Then the astronomers announced that the object was slowing down as it approached the Earth. The obvious conclusion was that it was a vehicle guided by some intelligent beings. Hence the visitor's label, even before we knew whether the object was piloted or not. This, of course, created a much bigger sensation than the mere prospect of collision with an asteroid, nuclear winter, and the almost certain elimination of all life on Earth. Although this too had been predicted and portrayed in numerous works of science fiction, the governments of Earth were totally flummoxed and without a plan. They argued and debated and dithered as the ESV, extrasolar vehicle, approached closer and closer. Many Republicans and some Democrats demanded that the ESV be shot down at the earliest possible moment. Others argued, with some force of logic, that it was unwise to attempt the first blow. It was unlikely that one spaceship had the capability of harming an entire planet, they reasoned. If it did, the chances were that an attempt on our part to destroy it first would be unsuccessful and would simply invite retaliation. In the end, the UN Security Council decided that the major powers would keep a fleet of aircraft in the air 24 hours a day, ready to attack the ESV the moment it displayed hostile intent. The strange craft circled the Earth once, then came down for a landing on Boston Common. It looked like a house. That is, it had a front door and windows and a roof. On the other hand, it did not have aluminum siding, a chimney, or a screen porch. The Army immediately surrounded the house with tanks, flamethrowers, and everything else they had. The Boston PD surrounded the Army with men in Kevlar vests and canine units. What an opportunity to use up equipment and earn overtime, and then demand an increase in the department's budget. In the third ring surrounding the house on the Common were the news media, using every motorized lift they could beg, rent, or buy from the local tree trimming contractors to get their cameras high enough to see what happened. The front door opened, and 1,000 safeties clicked off. 1,000 fingers caressed 1,000 triggers. Out stepped a woman. Nice figure. Correction, great figure. 1,000 fingers thumbed safeties back on. "Hi, guys. Take me to your leader," she said. The President and the Secretary of State, joined by the National Security Advisor, met with the alien visitor privately. The meeting took place at a Boston hotel, which somehow was able to move all of the guests on an entire floor to other rooms, so that the floor could be taken over by Secret Service agents. After introducing himself and his sidekicks, the Prez asked, "How should we address you, Ms. Bobby, with an I," the alien said. "How is it that you speak our language?" "Probably been monitoring our broadcast from outer space for years," muttered the National Security Advisor. "That's correct," and Bobby winked at the man. It is positively amazing that you look just like us, said the Secretary of State. Except that you look 30 years younger and 50 pounds lighter than me, is what she was really thinking. Well, we don't really. We just thought it might make things easier at first if we didn't look too alien, at least until you get to know us better. So I put on this form you see here, and she gestured from her chest to her knees. Is that something you can show us how to do? Blurted the Secretary of State before she could stop herself. Yes, well, that's what we're here for, to trade. We're a trade mission, I believe you call it. Why did you choose Boston to land in? Asked the National Security Advisor. Why not Washington or New York? If we had tried to land in D.C., you probably would have tried to shoot us down, she said. The word tried was not lost on the National Security Advisor. And New York is just too crowded. Well, said the President, we have a great many questions for you and your crew. You do have a crew? Yes, of course. One other. My pilot. His name is Phil. Our scientists want to meet with you, find out more about your your people, your planet, your galaxy. Yes, of course, there will be time for all that, but we really would like to begin trade negotiations as soon as possible. Say, tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Phil turned out to be the male equivalent of Bobby. That is to say, he was tall, good-looking in a masculine way, with a dreamy smile, and the same casual attitude. The first negotiating session took place under a tent set up on the Boston Common, a few feet from the house the aliens had arrived in, with the media in attendance. Phil and Bobby had insisted on these arrangements. If we meet with you in secret, it will only prompt speculation about our motives and generate conspiracy theories. We come in peace. And Phil smiled his dreamy smile. And we have nothing to hide. The aliens had killer holographic displays of what they were offering. Cold fusion using seawater. A liposuction process which also permanently removed unwanted hair and wrinkles. A cure for cancer, etc. Our negotiating team was, quite simply, overwhelmed. Finally, the Secretary of Commerce cleared his throat and said, You obviously have a technology that is vastly superior to ours, and you have come a long ways to offer us these things. So you must have something in mind that we can offer you in return. Bobby and Phil nodded. Mosquitoes, said Bobby. There was silence for a full minute. Mosquitoes, croaked the Secretary of Commerce from a throat gone dry. And black flies, added Phil. And black flies, the Secretary repeated dumbly. Bobby and Phil nodded twice. It will take us about a month, Bobby said. The Secretary of the Interior coughed. How will you go about this? I mean, are you going to use chemicals of some kind? The White House Chief of Staff spoke up. How are you going to dispose of all the, I guess you would say, the bodies? Small as they are, I imagine it would come to quite a lot of poundage. A little over 3 billion metric tons, said Phil. And no, we won't be using chemicals or anything else that will hurt other living things. And we will be capturing them, not killing them, added Bobby. We have a use for them which, unfortunately, I am unable to disclose to you at this time. She winked at the Chief of Staff. Security, you know. Can't have our little trade secrets fall into the hands of competitors. A month will be all the time we need to share with you the necessary technologies that we are offering in trade, said Phil. Our negotiating team huddled. What about no-see-ums? Asked the Secretary of Commerce. Will you take those too? What are no-see-ums? Asked Bobby. Ceratopogonidae, said the Secretary of the Interior. Biting midges. Bobby and Phil looked at each other. Certainly, said Phil. No problem, said Bobby. Our negotiating team huddled once more. We have to run this by our president and the Congress, said Commerce. Bobby and Phil nodded twice. Of course, said Bobby. We understand, said Phil. The discussion with the president was brief. Close the deal, damn it, before they offer it to the Europeans or the Chinese, he thundered. The congressional debate was almost as brief. The only naysayer was Senator Bottomfeeder from Missouri. "I smell a rat," he orated from the podium. "I plain don't trust these varmints from space. I may be just a country boy, but I know dickerin'. And when the deal sounds too good to be true, that's because it is too damn good to be true." The vote in the Senate was 99-1, and in the House it was unanimous. Take the deal. A month later, the visitors took off into space, trailing a great number of sealed containers, each of which looked exactly like the house they had arrived in. The President and the Secretary of State, looking 30 years younger, 50 pounds lighter, and glamorous in her new Versace dress, were there to see them off. A year after they left, the United States was seriously Mr. Big. Power was essentially free thanks to cold fusion, and foreign tourism was breaking records as visitors from other shores flocked to this country for liposuction treatments. "Ralph." "What?" "Come over here and take a look at this." Ralph went over to Jeremy's workstation and looked over his shoulder. "What am I supposed to be looking at?" he said. "This. Bird populations plunging." Ralph read for a minute, silently. "How does this study correlate to overseas data?" he asked. "If anything," Jeremy said, "the data from other countries is even worse. And here's another thing." He pulled up another item on his screen. "Crops are failing because they depend upon birds to pollinate them." Ralph was silent for a long time. "Do you think it's a cascade?" he asked. "I'm afraid to think at all," Jeremy said. Of the roughly 3,500 identified species of mosquito, only about a couple of hundred bite or bother people, but mosquitoes and black flies serve other purposes than merely to annoy mankind and spread disease. Migratory birds that nest in the Arctic tundra rely upon mosquitoes as a food source. Caribou herds alter their routes to try and escape them, and where the caribou roam, they affect the local ecology by trampling and fertilizing the soil and providing food for predators such as wolves. Many species of fish, frogs, salamanders, lizards, bats, and spiders consume mosquitoes. Mosquito larvae feed on decaying leaves, other organic detritus, and microorganisms. Thousands of plant species depend upon mosquitoes for pollination. If you eliminate a species at the top of the food chain, the effects may be quite limited, but when you eliminate a species at or near the bottom of the food chain, it is impossible to predict with any accuracy how far the ripples will spread, and to what extent it will cause a domino effect or cascade. At least, it's impossible for us to predict this with our current technology. 2 years after the visitors had departed, the world economy was in ruins. Without mosquitoes and black flies, a third of the world's bird population had died off. Crops that depended on the birds for pollination and to consume other damaging insects had failed. Other animal and plant populations were affected. The entire world ecosystem was out of kilter. Our planet had been teetering on a knife edge before the visitors came, and the removal of the insects was the straw that broke the camel's back. There were food riots in Pakistan, and military installations were overrun. The unthinkable happened, and a missile was launched, destroying Mumbai. India retaliated. Iran attacked Israel, and Israel retaliated. The conflagration spread remorselessly. 50 years later, the visitors landed again on what had been the White House lawn. There were no birds and no people. Bobby and Phil got out and looked around. Then Phil reached inside the front door and pulled out a sign and a mallet. He walked a little ways off and pounded the sign into the lawn. Then he and Bobby returned to their ship and took off again. Property for sale, prime location. Submit inquiries to Sirius Galactic Realty. Hyperspace link 43501875078787.